The intersection of psychology and veganism. We're going to talk about it today on the exam room. And welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. But we're not just talking about nutrition today. We're talking about the broad spectrum analysis, to try to sound educated, of eating a plant-based diet. Indeed, we are looking at the psychological components of everything today with a brilliant author. She herself is a psychologist. She is a vegan educator, a food for life instructor with us here at the Physicians Committee, and an author of the book, The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. And with that, we welcome Dr. Angela Crawford to the exam room. Thanks for being here, Dr. Crawford.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm thrilled that you're here. And first of all, congratulations on the release of this book. Very cool read.
Well, thank you. It was a work of passion and just something that I was very fascinated to study and write about.
Absolutely. And you did a magnificent job of it. And by the way, there is a link to pick up your copy of the book right now in the show description and in the episode notes. This is not the typical book that we talk about here on the program because it's not full of recipes and nutrition science. As I said, this really does take a much more 30,000 foot view of why eating a plant-based diet is a good idea from the psychological factor. We're not just going through the health lens. Why did you want to paint such a broad picture with this book?
Well, as someone who, as a psychologist, I've always been fascinated by personal growth, mind, body, spirit connection. And when I became vegetarian and then vegan, I really learned a lot about the nutritional benefits of a plant-based diet. And I also learned the ethical reasons for eating plant-based as well as the environmental. So what I felt wasn't looked at as much was how does moving towards this lifestyle affect us psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually? And I knew I myself had had a lot of changes in those respects as I transitioned into veganism. And I met other people along the way across the globe through different networking groups I was part of who had also had changes in these ways. So I wanted to look at that more closely, which led me to conduct some surveys and do interviews with vegans across the globe about their experiences in terms of the emotional and psychological and spiritual shifts that they experienced.
All right, let's start with the psychological shifts. I know I certainly was not expecting to have a psychological shift when I changed up my diet, but I think over time that helped. And so when you're talking about the typical shift psychologically for somebody who begins to eat a plant-based diet and adopt this lifestyle, what kind of shifts are we talking about?
Yeah, I think it can be on a couple of different levels. So one level can be the nutritional level, eating more plant foods, especially whole plant foods, fruits and vegetables, has been linked in research to improved emotional well-being and improved mental health. But beyond that, in addition to any nutritional impacts that it might have on our gut microbiome and on our neurochemistry, there's also the shift of aligning with our values. For many people, no matter what reason they become plant-based, whether it's for health or whether it's for the planet or whether it's for animals or some combination, it takes aligning with your values in a strong way to become plant-based or vegan in our world, especially now when it's still a minority lifestyle. It's not still as much the norm as we'd love it to be. So it takes a true listening to inner wisdom or guidance to say, hey, this is what I need to do, whether for my health or my ethics or all of the above. So there's this values alignment. I think for many people also, there's a deepening of a sense of purpose, because one shift we can make that we do every day, like eating, can have an effect on many, many things that we care about and empower us in ways that we hadn't realized. So those are some of the psychological shifts that both I experienced and the people I interviewed reported.
Yeah, definitely. You hear a lot about that in terms of people finding a purpose. Like, you always want to talk about the why. It's not like, oh, I'm doing it because it's good for me, it's good for the environment. I somehow feel like there's a much deeper purpose there. Not that those aren't two very important things, but it really does. It helps you dive down and really psychoanalyze yourself and find your values. And I think even, wouldn't you say, discover things about yourself that you didn't already know?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. For example, I've always identified as an introvert. I still think of myself that way, but becoming vegan, because it was so important to me on so many levels, I could see that plant-based nutrition could help reverse many of the common diseases that we see in our country and in the world. I saw that it could make a difference for animals. It could make a difference for our environment. It could make a difference for my own well-being. And so I was willing to step out in a way that I hadn't before becoming vegan, developing a blog and writing articles, and now researching and writing a book, being on podcasts like this. There was something about it. I discovered something in me that I hadn't realized that was there, because it was something I cared about so deeply and knew could help others. And I think other people find similar things, their willingness to overcome that tendency so many of us have of just wanting to fit in or do what's easiest, eat the way that's easiest, the way everyone around us is eating. We discover some reason inside of us that we want to shift and be willing to be different, to honor what we believe or what we know is right for us and for others.
Yeah, it's funny. Introverts, I feel, are like extroverts that just haven't learned the way that makes them communicate comfortably. Like, people think that I'm an extrovert. I'm not. Like, you give me one on one, and if I don't know you, like, I'm going to have a real hard time talking to you. Like, you have to initiate the conversation. And if I'm at a party, like, I don't want to talk to anybody who I don't know. And it's just really awkward for me. But you put me up on a stage in a room full of strangers with a microphone where I don't have to worry about holding a two-way conversation. I'm good to go. I love doing that. And I love doing the podcast. And like, that's great for me. But I mean, would you agree, as a psychologist, and I realize that this is a little bit of a detour here, but would you agree that, in a sense, like, introverts, they're just waiting to find that way that they can communicate comfortably with the masses?
Yeah, I would say there's truth to that. That when we find something that really deeply inspires us or matters deeply, introverts can communicate quite well often, because they're deep thinkers. They've often gone deep with certain topics and want to share about them. And you're right, it is often just having the right platform or approach or passion to drive that. Like the one-on-one, sometimes small talk is not easy for me and for many introverts, but give us something we're passionate about and a whole different part of us can open up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's get back to the book. You also talked about the changes emotionally. We've kind of tippy-toed on this, but let's really dive in now. So when you're talking about how a person's emotions change or how they feel emotionally once they've made this shift, what are you talking about here?
Yeah, it can be complex. So I will just say that it's not like being plant-based or vegan is a fix for everything and you're never going to have tough emotions. Um, in fact, sometimes, as a vegan or a plant-based person, there can be challenging emotions as you're realizing things that maybe you hadn't realized before. So for me, what I had noticed as I talked to people is, sometimes there were struggles as people realized what happens to animals in animal agriculture that brought up tough feelings. But the people I interviewed who were really thriving learned to navigate those tough feelings by having ways to work through the emotions that came up and honoring their feelings, but going, I think, to a more true, authentic way of living, which means, yes, there are tough things in this world. And then what can I do about them? What actions can I take that I feel good about? And so there was what I called in the book authentic fulfillment, this sense that I can't fix everything in the world, but I do have control over some things, and what actions can I take that are healthy for me and also help things that I care about. So I think that was one powerful shift that for many people that I interviewed, going plant-based or vegan could help with.
So, all right, let me see here if I can't interpret some of that. When you say like learning about animal agriculture and some of that stuff there, help them deal with emotions or realize emotions, like are we talking about trauma that they may have experienced themselves growing up, or then just realizing that they have more empathy for things that than they previously realized?
Yeah, again, it can be so varied because people become vegan for so many different reasons. So there are some people who are, I would say, vegan activists who witness firsthand what happens in animal agriculture and sort of the horrific things that happen to animals in our animal agriculture system. And so people that witness that, that can be traumatic, whether they've had childhood trauma or not. It's disturbing if you watch videos about things like that, or if someone's an activist and witnesses that firsthand. So some of the people that I interviewed in my research were activists and had faced watching things that most of us turn away from. We don't really look at how our food is produced. And so, when people who advocate for on behalf of animals actually look at that more closely, they witness things that many of us turn away from and never acknowledge. So there's that aspect for some people who go vegan. For others, it might just be this, more simple stress of being different in your family. You're the odd one out because you're not eating the way other people eat. So I want to acknowledge that there can be challenges emotionally, that it's not always just bright and cheery, and yet learning to navigate those can actually, I think, make us fuller human beings ultimately.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I also want to talk to you now about the spiritually and those changes. This is very interesting to me. Are we implying here based off, and you talk to a lot of people, I think it's like 350 people who you interviewed, 350 vegans you spoke to for this book. Are you implying based off of their responses that their diet actually brought them closer to their God, a God, the God, however you want to phrase it?
Yeah, well, I have to acknowledge, my research is exploratory. It wasn't with a randomized sample, so I can't say that, oh, this is what all vegans experience or anything along those lines. But among those who participated in my survey and then in interviews, there was a large number that reported spiritual changes or deepening that came alongside their vegan lifestyle. Some people already were spiritual, and veganism just seemed like a right next step to honor their ethics. For other people, the spirituality seemed to open as they went on the vegan path, that there was something about eating plant-based, eating lighter, eating more naturally and with less cruelty, that led people to feel more connected to nature and sometimes to their higher power. So there was this connection, and that wasn't something I was necessarily expecting. That was sort of a surprise response that came up in a lot of the open-ended questions, responses that people gave on the survey. That, I feel interconnected with nature and all sentient beings in a way I hadn't before. I feel more spiritual, that I don't have to take a life in order to nourish myself and eat, that it feels more right and peaceful to me. So that was a result that sort of surprised me too.
Yeah, okay. Because I was thinking, like, I mean, not that this couldn't happen, but I would be surprised if somebody, began eating this way and felt the need to rush down to confession, if they were raised Catholic and, confess all their sins. But the connection to everything around and just kind of that general spirituality thing, that definitely does make sense because it puts things into perspective. You get exposed to a new way of thinking by eating this way. And certainly I think that will make you feel more grounded. And I think for a lot of people, especially if they enter veganism from an ethical standpoint, then that connectivity to the world is going to be that much stronger. And for those who never even thought about it, to experience it first time, That can be pretty powerful stuff, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, for many people. There's a lot of great quotes in that chapter of the book to try to illustrate what this looked like for people because it's one of those things it's a little harder to describe. It can be so nuanced and different for different people. But yeah, there was something about the whole shift, and it happened both for those that shifted more for health reasons. Many of them describe this shift too of feeling more aligned and peaceful and more spiritually and ethically in alignment. And then also those, of course, that shifted for more ethical reasons. A lot of times it just started to all come together for people where, I changed my diet for one reason, but now I'm discovering all these other reasons that make it very fulfilling for me.
What about your story? What was that moment for you where you began to recognize that, yeah, maybe making this change would be of great benefit to me? What was that moment for you?
Yeah. It started first when I became vegetarian back in early 2007. I had seen a program on PBS about workers in a meat processing plant. And even though it didn't show any gory details, it was enough to get me thinking about how my food was produced and how it got to me. And even though I had always thought, like, I can't imagine what a vegetarian or vegan eats, I couldn't imagine eating that way. I grew up in the Midwest. I have to have meat. That's what I've been told. Watching that program just got me thinking. And then I quickly thought, well, if I don't like how the workers were treated in this particular documentary, the workers were often injured and were encouraged not to take time off work or they might lose their job and they had few financial resources. So my empathy for the workers got me thinking about the animals. And then the very next day I bought a plant-based cookbook. I made my first plant-based lasagna. It didn't even have the pots and pans to make it. I had to go buy them, but it was delicious. My family enjoyed it. And I just started on a journey of reading everything I could. And I quickly learned I have a family history of heart disease. And I learned about Dr. Dean Ornish's work and Dr. Esselstyn's work. And I realized, well, this is the best thing for me to do. And I started with vegetarian. I tried to limit the dairy and eggs because I understood that they weren't the healthiest or most compassionate options. But I didn't go fully vegan until about 6.5 years ago. To something in me realized it was time to go all the way with it. So yeah, it was a mixture of compassion and also realizing the health benefits, and then over time seeing how it was interconnected with so many other things.
All right. Now, I want for you to put on your psychologist hat for this one. Average person, I mean, we go through every day having thousands of thoughts. I mean, we just can't stop our brain from thinking. How can we recognize the thoughts that are the ones that can spark this change? And not just spark it, but get us excited to move forward in a different direction. How can we recognize those are the thoughts that we should be keying in on?
That's so interesting. Yeah. I've realized since I became vegan that there were seeds that were planted before I took those first steps. And one was that I had eaten at a conference center that served plant-based food that was delicious. So I think that sometimes we need to experience vegan food and how delicious and nutritious and appealing it can be, because sometimes people think vegan food is like, I don't know, foreign or something. I've heard people say to me like, well, I don't eat that because I don't eat vegan. And I'm just like, well, you do eat vegan, you eat plants, so people don't always understand what it means or that it's doable. So I think sometimes just having the experience of delicious plant-based food, whether it be at a restaurant or just trying out a recipe, trying to veganize your favorite meal. So sometimes action precedes the shifts in thinking that you're referring to. But then alongside that, there can be just a willingness to learn. I think to learn about how is our food produced, or to really read about research and health and what are truly research-based ways of eating that help our health. So I think it's being willing to learn and opening our eyes and listening then what feels right inside, because a lot of times once we really connect with it, there's an inner knowing that this makes sense.
Now, keep your psychologist hat on, and also I need for you to kind of check your bias a little bit. So just give me the Dr. Crawford answer and nothing but the facts here. Do you think that when it comes to the way that the animal agriculture industry is set up, it's purposely set up to kind of shield the typical consumer from how it actually operates, how that piece of steak, that hamburger got on those store shelves and ultimately into the refrigerator, because they know that had the average consumer known how this meat was made, they would then begin the process of thinking and perhaps analyzing and maybe make a different decision as far as what's for dinner.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to argue otherwise there. The meat and dairy industry have a lot of money, a lot of lobbying dollars, and they want to continue to sell their products. I didn't have a clue. I grew up in the Midwest. I had never seen anything other than maybe cows grazing in a field. I'd never seen a factory farm. I'd never seen what animal agriculture really looked like on a deeper level. I think a lot of effort goes into making it seem sanitized or green, environmentally friendly, compassionate through the labeling that's used, through the descriptions that are used, and through how certain information is really shielded from us unless we really seek it out.
Yeah, you have to take the time to do it. And, I wonder how differently your life would have played out had you not seen that documentary on PBS that day. Were you just channel surfing and came across it?
We were watching another program, and it was just a segment that came on. And why it affected me, it didn't affect my boyfriend, now husband, in the same way. Maybe because I was working with injured workers in the work I did, that just something struck a chord. Maybe it was that plant-based meal I'd had just a couple months before that let me know, hey, this is doable. I'm just willing to do the cooking and stuff that would be necessary. So it's hard for me to imagine. I'm a compassionate person and I care about health. Why didn't I see it sooner? I sometimes do wonder that, but I'm grateful that I did, because I feel like it's helped me live a healthier, truer life.
Yeah, and that's, big part of the book. I mean, you write about, quote, the courage to live by our deepest values. And once you discover that, it does take a certain amount of courage to continue to live that way when people who eat a plant-based diet represent roughly 1% of the population, which means we're outnumbered 99 to 1. And a lot of times there's a lot of pressure from the 99 to get back on their wagon. You call those the psychosocial factors. Those are the things that are often overlooked in your estimation. What is your advice for somebody who feels those pressures, whether it be from their family, their friends, their coworkers, Joe Schmo down the street? How can they deal with that?
Yeah. I think, first of all, we need to have a strong sense of our why, as you and I talked about a little earlier. And so sometimes connecting with that why on a regular basis can really help. Whether it even be writing it out, whether if it's for your health and because you want to live a vibrant, healthy, long life, or whether it's because of other reasons like ethics or compassion, really staying connected to why you're doing this, first of all, and continuing to learn, because the more we keep learning the latest research on health or on other aspects of this, it keeps us motivated. And I think a couple other factors would be having a good support system. They find that social factors can be one of the biggest reasons that people have trouble sticking to a plant-based diet. And so if we have a good support system of people that are on this same journey with us, that's where things like PCRM and the Food for Life program, where I'm an instructor, and other things, building healthy communities as our local plant-based groups, these kinds of networks can help us so that when we feel stressed or discouraged because we might be the only one in our circle, we have support. And then I think last of all would be learning communication skills to speak up in social situations, to learn how to kind of graciously speak up about our why for being vegan or plant-based, and offer to bring food when we're at a gathering, not to assume that there will be plant-based food there, to let the host know or to advocate for a restaurant that would have foods that are healthy and nourishing and plant-based. So I think we need to learn how to communicate and be assertive too.
And one of the things also that you talk about in the book is what happens when we don't live in alignment with our core values, and maybe we've succumbed to that pressure. What is that internal conflict like for the person? What are the ramifications that come with putting on that front and not
Mm.
being yourself and ignoring that why when you know it's just screaming at you to follow your path?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're naming, what can sometimes be called cognitive dissonance when we're out of alignment with our values in how we're acting and the choices we're making. And there's something that can feel deeply wrong inside where we don't feel authentic or true to ourselves. And it can come out in different ways. But often when we're not feeling comfortable with something, it can be in part because a value that we really honor inside is not being we're not acting in alignment with that in our choices, or something in our situation is compromising that value. So I think being in touch with what our core values are, even taking the time to think about what really matters to me, what are the things that when I look back at my life, I'm going to want to know that I honored these characteristics or qualities. Really, I think it's important for a life that we feel good about and that makes us feel authentic and fulfilled.
And would you recommend maybe writing these core values down and, really committing them not just to paper, but to memory as well, so that you constantly are able to embrace them and live with them yourself, so they don't necessarily get shoved aside. And it's
Yeah.
just a reminder to keep going and stand your or live your truth, as the kids like to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that, Chuck. In the book, I have some exercises that help you assess what your core values are. And you can even Google core values online, and there will be lists of different qualities. And just go through it and see which of these really resonate with me. Circle the ones you feel are important to you, and then narrow it down to about 3 to 5 that are most important. And often these are the things that can guide our daily choices. That makes life actually flow easier because, for example, compassion is a core value for me. I can look at, are my actions aligning with that value of compassion? Did I just treat this other person with compassion? Um, so it really can be a very helpful exercise, and people feel more at peace, I think, when they are in touch with their values and trying their best to live aligned with them.
Yeah. I love the exercises that you have in this book, by the way. I think that they're gold and they're pretty easy for anybody to follow. And so again, we've got a link down below in the show description and in the episode notes. This is like really just a great read. Again, the book is called The Vegan Transformation. Definitely pick up your copy. It's clear that you definitely wore your psychologist hat when putting this together. Final question I have for you. I mean, you talked to 350 or surveyed 350 vegans. How long did this process take? Because that is an awful lot of people.
Yeah, well, I surveyed 350, and then I did in-depth interviews with 75 or more of them. And it did take about a year and a half for the research because I was working full time at that time as a psychotherapist. And so just connecting with people online to do the surveys, I didn't yet have a very big network. I was still a fairly new vegan myself. And so about a year and a half for the research part of it, of collecting surveys and doing interviews, and then probably another year and a half for the writing process. So it's been a work in progress, and so it's exciting to see it out in the world now.
Absolutely, absolutely, and many of my friends are mentioned in here, including Dr. Akil Tehar. He's got a heck of a story. I love that guy.
Yeah,
This
he
really
was
is
one of
kind
the
of a
people
who's
who
who.
I reference in the book in chapter
Mm-hmm.
4 on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Boy, yeah, did he find his? And his book is Open Heart. It's just a great read. But anyway, do you have any Food for Life classes coming up that you're teaching? How can people find you as an instructor? I always want to make sure that we
Oh,
promote
yeah.
our
Well, if you
programs.
go to the PCRM Food for Life classes tab under PCRM website, I right now at this moment I don't have any because I've been on the book launch mode, but I do plan to offer some again. And so far, I found doing them online is a great way to connect with people. So I'll probably offer some online classes maybe later in the summer and or early fall.
Sounds good. Not pressuring you to keep doing the book thing because this comes at it from again it comes at eating a plant-based diet, the vegan diet, like from a different angle. We're so used to like recipes and nutrition science, but you're coming at it from just a different avenue, and it was actually a refreshing read. I don't know how else to describe it other than refreshing and insightful. So, thank you for your contribution, my friend.
Well, thank you. And there are even a few recipes in it. Just some of the people I interviewed shared their favorite recipes. So there are a few because my non-vegan friends told me, well, there have to be some recipes. So there are some recipes, about 25 or so.
Gotcha. But it's anything but your typical cookbook. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yep.
Dr. Angela Crawford, thank you so very much. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. This is such a pleasure to be here.